you didn't see the FC show, we asked Stevie about how to stay focused. And we were asking on the other side of things, in that sometimes you think, oh, the title's already ours, and you have to catch yourself. Stevie said he's had to do that when he was a player, catch yourself and focus on exactly what's in front of you. But I thought of it too, Stevie. So it's interesting that Dalen brought it up. After it was 2-2, in that the reverse side of that, not letting it get into your head like, oh my goodness, is this getting away from us now? Like, how do you switch your head off and do that?
Well, maybe the one thing I didn't mention that I should have done on the show when I said that was the times it happened was late in games. It was more because in the meat of the game, in the middle of the game, you are concentrated. It's not till towards the end of games where you're maybe leading and something happens. As I said, you know, the crowd all of a sudden come to life because you know something's happened elsewhere. That was probably more of that. I didn't see anybody in an Arsenal jersey today losing concentration. I just saw two mistakes, you know, which end up costing them big time, cost them 2 points. The mistake from Gabriel and the mistake from Saka. You know, I mean, West Ham, this is a London derby again. We shouldn't forget that. It's a London derby against a West Ham team. The only way they're going to give you problems is physically. And that's all it was. Jared Bourne had a couple of breaks, but generally it was, you know, stay on your feet with Antonio because he's a battering ram. So again, that's kind of why I'm not on the experience route. They've made a couple of mistakes, and unfortunately, they've got punished for them.
All right, James Olley was at the London Stadium today, a senior football writer at ESPN. Hey, James, welcome in. Tell us your observations of what you saw today there.
I think Stevie's being quite kind on them, really. I have to say, at 2-0 in this stadium, the game was over. The game was there for the taking. This isn't Anfield. This isn't a place where, you know, these home games are kind of a referendum on whether David Moyes should be manager. You can hear it in the conversations going on when they're 2-0 down. And then, remember, they got beaten 5-1 here by Newcastle not that long ago, and earlier this month, in fact. And there was a palpable sense in the stadium that, oh, here we go again, you know. And Arsenal didn't kill the game off. And these are the moments. And look, it's difficult to be too harsh on them because they've had such a great season. But you are up against an absolute machine in Manchester City. And what happened here, you know, they've let them back into the title race with 2 games on successive Sundays where they've not killed it off when they've been in the ascendancy. And you can write it off once as being the vagaries, the idiosyncrasies of Anfield, the fact that Liverpool put on a good second half display. But it reminded me at 2-0 when Xhaka made that needless tackle on Trent Alexander-Arnold and just got everybody riled up inside the stadium at Anfield. Liverpool then went and scored. And I just thought here, Thomas Partey just switched off. I know Stevie's talking about the penalty with Gabriel, but just before that, Partey loses the ball completely needlessly. Had total control of the game, total control of the ball. Thomas Partey loses the ball in midfield, Declan Rice is suddenly on the back foot. Rice plays to Paqueta. Gabriel makes the challenge, and they're back in the game. And it just strikes me as, I don't think it's complacency. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's naivety. Maybe they thought they'd got the job done. It was so quiet at the London Stadium at 2-0. Absolutely dead. The game was, it wasn't over because it was half an hour in, but it felt as though it was the final 10 minutes of the game, not the first half an hour. And Arsenal have just allowed their minds to wander in both of those matches, and they've been punished in the most brutal way possible. And unfortunately, these are the margins when you're dealing against, you know, you're playing against the Manchester City side that gets 90 plus points every single season. You know, a point at Liverpool and a point at West Ham normally would be all right in the context of the season. But City make you have to go the extra mile in these matches. And unfortunately, they've come up short. And now they've lost control of the title race.
Go on, Stevie.
Well, unfortunately, what is the Thomas Partey incident where it all starts with Declan Rice is one of those things that, unfortunately, what has made Arsenal so good can sometimes bite you on the backside because it's all about playing out from the back. It's this, we will continue to do it, and this manager phrase of, I will take responsibility if we lose a goal because of it. That's why they lost that's where the penalty kick started. The Gabriel gave away. You know, they are on a football field. The last place you want the ball It's 30 yards from your goal, facing the goal. Somebody rolls it to you, and you've got somebody like Declan Rice up your backside. It's the last place you want the ball. And yes, in today's game, Partey gets the blame, but it's just the last place you want the ball because there's no room for it. You cannot make an error. If you do not have a good touch, if you lose the ball, the other team's on top of you, as Declan Rice was. So it's one of those situations where it has to be perfect. There's no parachute. There's no get out clause. If you get it wrong at any sort of manner, then you're in trouble. So again, what has made them so good is kind of bitting them in the backside with a penalty kick.
Just on that note, though, too, like there's an element of to win this thing, your best players have to play at a really elite level, and you can't make mistakes. And Partey today was probably one of the, that was a mistake. And he overall, at times you could hear Arteta earlier in the game tell him to try to move the ball quicker and play it faster. But you need to have all your guys play at the highest level, and that's the hard part. To what James just said, with City applying that pressure, is that puts that pressure on you. That's why when they scored 2-0, it felt like a pressure release, but they couldn't really act like that, and they didn't. They kept pushing forward the next 20 minutes, but overall. As good as Partey's season has been, this was not one of his best performances. And in these moments, like he's got to be great, as well as some number of other guys, because it's not like a ton of squad depth. It's those first dudes have to be really good.
We've got some viewer questions coming in, James. Let me start with you. It says a lot of the big six matchups are rather dull in recent seasons. Do you expect City against Arsenal to be a barn burner or more of a game of chess?
No, I think they'll go for it. I think it will be a sort of a replication of the Liverpool-Arsenal game, although with a little less chaos, perhaps, because of how bad Liverpool are defensively, and City obviously, I think it will be ferocious in the middle of the pitch, because I think the big question about Arsenal before they went to Anfield was, are they prepared to play the way they do home and away pretty much everywhere else? Are they prepared to go and try and dictate and really impose themselves on opponents in Anfield, one of the toughest places you can go? The answer to that emphatically was yes. They were magnificent in that first half against Liverpool. The task of trying to control the game against Manchester City in their own stadium is as hard as it gets. You think about the Barcelona team under Pep Guardiola. It doesn't matter who you were, Real Madrid, anybody. Real Madrid became a counter-attacking side even there because they knew they couldn't control the ball. I think Arsenal all season, Arteta's been very consistent with this message of it. This is who we are. This is our identity. This is how we play. And I think their approach will make it an absolute cracker. If they can control the, and this is why I come back to the midfield issue. Again, I agree with everything Stevie said there in response to about Thomas Partey, but that midfield is going to be where the game is won and lost against Manchester City, quite conceivably where the title is won and lost. And Partey, Xhaka and Odegaard have been magnificent this season, really, really good all season long, controlled games, home and away. But in the last couple of matches, those mistakes have started to creep in. And look, if they do that against City, they'll lose the game. And one other thing I'd like to say about this West Ham game in relation to City is that when it went 2-2, they didn't really look like scoring again, Arsenal. And it was end-to-end. It was basketball at Liverpool. And that, I think, said a lot about Liverpool's defending. West Ham are not a great side defensively. Yeah, Arsenal really created very little when it went 2-2. And again, if they lose control of the game against City, City are the best around at keeping the ball. They cannot afford to do that again. If they do that at the Etihad, they will lose. And if they lose at the Etihad, then I'm not saying it's gone, but then the title looks a remote possibility for them, doesn't it?
Can they beat City, Stevie, in this game? And if so, how are they going to do it?
Yes, they can. Listen, there's no question that if they're at their best and they're passing the ball well, moving around well, and they take the chances, then they can beat anybody at the best. Problem is, you're going into this game not at your best. Having spent most of the season being really consistent and putting 90 minutes together most weekends, they're starting to put periods of time together, which, when it comes to the business end, is looking like it's not enough. For 30 minutes today, the game looked over, but then there's another hour, and then we know what's happened. Same thing against Liverpool for 45 minutes. Absolute different class. And then the next 45 disappeared. It's not something Arsenal have done for the majority of the season. They've basically started the game and finished the game on top and had control of pretty much all the games. This is the wrong time of the season to start just dominating periods of games because, again, as Olley said, if you're just dominating for a little period against Man City, unfortunately, when they're dominating, they've got a guy called Haaland who's going to be sticking the ball in the net to take advantage of that dominance. So, yeah, I mean, yes, they can win the game, but I don't think there's anybody outside of Arsenal Stadium that's going to think and believe that Arsenal's going to beat Manchester City in Manchester.
Well, let me put this question to you from one of our viewers then, Dalen. Does City winning big, 27 goals in the last 6 games in all competitions, subconsciously add more pressure on Arsenal?
I don't see how it can't, because you do see the form they're in. So it puts you think that, okay, you have to win. You have to match what they're doing, and not necessarily the output of goals, but definitely the points. And that hasn't happened that way on either front. And I think there's an element of we've got to elevate our game because you're seeing where they're at. And obviously Arsenal plays Southampton, play another league game before these teams meet on the 26th. And the FA Cup is next week. And obviously the Champions League in between for City. So they've done their job as it relates to the league. They have other work they're going to do in other competitions. And the next time they play is going to be Arsenal. And Arsenal has to be like that Southampton game on Friday becomes just absolutely massive. It's another must-win game. And you have the pressure that you have to do it because you know City's just going to be waiting in the wings to play you. Now, they've got other things going on, as I mentioned, but it's a different animal. And obviously that pressure mounts. And with the way that they've gone up in these games and drawn these games that feel like losses do not help the mentality going into that game. So they have to not just win, but perform well, I feel like, to feel good about going on the road to Manchester, as Stevie said. You know, outside of them, and I'm not even sure will think they're going to win. The odds makers, I wonder what the number is going to be on that game, because everybody is going to think City's going to win that game, which sometimes does end up being an interesting twist in the title chase or just sports in general. When everybody thinks one thing's going to happen, the opposite can happen. But it's you're seeing the deck pretty hardly stacked against the Gunners right now.
So maybe worth a cheeky bet. We can ask you a bit more about that in a minute, Dalen. James, we know you're going to have a lot of work, but seeing as though Dalen has talked about that game that's next for Arsenal coming up on Friday against Southampton, obviously it goes without saying they absolutely have to win it. But does it need to be an emphatic win as well, just to kind of put things back on the steady even for them?
No, I think they just need to get over the line. You know, the fact that City don't play that weekend, obviously, well, I mean, they're not in the league, they're playing the FA Cup. It will give them psychologically, most importantly, you know, an advantage. What would they be? 7 points clear. I know they'll have played 2 games more, but I think they just need to find a way to win after 2 draws. And those questions will be asked about the mentality, about maybe even the fatigue. I mean, not necessarily saying that Bukayo Saka missed the penalty today because he was tired, but I did interview him about a month ago and just asked him a fairly sort of generic question about how he was feeling ahead of the end of this, you know, the run-in, having played a mid-season World Cup, the condensed schedule, all that sort of thing. And he gave me this really sort of nice answer about how, you know, I'm just going to push down, knuckle down, push through to the end of the season, and then I'm going to go to my room and sleep for the summer. And it was a really nice little line, but it just hinted at he's been asked to do so much game after game after game. And maybe that's the only danger against Southampton on Friday, that, again, it's going to be those creative players. The game is going to be played in Southampton's half. They're going to, we presume, pack the defence, stick many men behind the ball. It's going to be, the onus is going to be on the Sakas, the Martinellis, the Odegaards to get them going again, as it has been time and time again this season. And perhaps that's the only thing, that you're going to those same guys. Maybe you might look to freshen it up. Maybe Trossard comes in. Great signing in January, gives them another option. And Nketiah's back fit now as well, although I think Jesus will probably continue to lead the line. So they do have 1 or 2 options if they want to change it up. But no, I think they just have to get the result by hook or by crook and make sure they've got that big lead on the board, because that'll be the big thing. They can point to the scoreboard pressure, if you like, to Manchester City and say, look, we have the points, you have the games. That's the most pressure they can apply at this point.
Well,
James, great to have you with us.
Can I ask the boy, just off the back of what Olley was saying there, is it just me, but I get the impression that Man City look as though they've just started the season, and Arsenal as Olley's saying, with Saka talking about tiredness a little bit. When I think of both sides, I think of a fresh Man City, almost kind of they're starting the season. Does that make any sense? And kind of Arsenal looking a little fatigued. Does anybody else get that impression that City just look completely fresh?
No, I thought when City beat Liverpool and just rolled them over really in that second half, I think that almost fired the starting pistol on their season really. And you look at some of the players that are coming to the fore. Now, De Bruyne had probably not been on his A game. I mean, even Haaland had a little bit of a mid-season. I wouldn't say it's a dip when he scored 500 goals or whatever he has this season, but he did have a little run of games where he wasn't quite as prolific as he has been for the rest of the campaign. Grealish is starting to come to the fore. Mahrez is consistent again. You do get the sense about peaking at the right time. They've been there, they've done it, they've won 4 titles. They know what they're doing. Whereas Arsenal have been, as I say, going to those same players. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I know that there were 7 players that started every single game, every single Premier League game for Arsenal, up to about 20, 22, 24 matches, something like that. So in that area, it's a huge ask of those players to go and go and go again. And they don't obviously have the expertise, the know-how to necessarily tailor their season to peak at the right time. I remember Harry Kane talking about this at the World Cup, that when he won the Golden Boot in 2018, even though he scored more goals than anyone else, he felt tired by the time he got to the semi-finals, yet he learned to taper his performance through tournaments. And City have done that. It's Stevie will know better than me. It's a skill you acquire over time, and Arsenal don't have it yet, whereas City do.
I think the depth of the squad is just different though too. I mean, when you look even this past week with the lineup they had against Bayern versus Leicester, like they can just swap guys out, then the level doesn't drop as much as it does for some of the guys in Arsenal when you have to sub in. I mean, Nketiah's had decent moments, but that's a big change from him to Jesus. Whereas you don't have the same thing across all the attacking positions at City, where they just have that squad depth it's better, and that's where you see this freshness. And also, I think Haaland not playing the World Cup helps, and some other things. Their team overall and their institutional knowledge of doing this many times helps.
James, we are going to let you escape now before they kick you out of the stadium there. But it's been great to have you with us as always. We'll speak to you again soon. Let me continue that chat though with you two guys just before we do close up. What are you expecting from this game against Southampton, Stevie?
I expect Arsenal to win it. And if they start the way they did against Liverpool and West Ham, then the game will be over. Southampton's a team that they started well in a lot of games, but then once something happens to them, they seem to just, somebody pulls the plug and they just go flat, and then it's just the game's done. So I don't expect Arsenal to slip up at all in this game. I expect them to win. Yes, they'll probably be a little jittery going into it because they know they can't afford to slip up, but ultimately, with the ability they have and the way they play, it will be too much for Southampton.
What does an Arsenal fan want then, just to end at this point, Dalen? Do they want, as James said, for them to just get over the line and still win this game, or do they want a big fat result that makes them go, whoosh?
Okay, for the love of God, we need 3 points. Let's just start there. Everything else is gravy. But yes, I would like to see them play better because City is the next challenger for them. So I think you want to go in with confidence go into that game. You can't go in just scuttling into the game and finding the 3 points. As much as that is, that's all you really need. But I do think to beat City, you got to be at your absolute best, mentally, physically, all of it. So I think it's important that they put in a heck of a performance and play well in the game and play well for more sustained period of time. The last 2 weeks really was 40 minutes at Liverpool, about 30 minutes today, where they bossed the game and played really well. And in the second half of both those matches, they struggled. And it's one thing being on the road at Anfield, like I said earlier, it's totally different at West Ham. And if they make that penalty, it's different. But this is a game where I think they need to play well, play more consistently, win the game, and go into that City clash with some confidence, because obviously the season's going to come kind of boiling out of that.
Thank you very much for watching ESPN FC on YouTube. For more highlights, analysis, and exclusive content, be sure to subscribe.